Right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your patience with our slightly late start. I am Mandisa Granderson, Manager Client Support Services at Export TT Limited, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to day 2 of our webinar series on doing business in Europe, the Fit for Europe experience. Now, yesterday, if you are joining us for the first time, we focused on the experience and outcomes of the goods companies within the project, but today it is all about services. So for context, the cornerstone of the Fit for Europe 2 project is capacity building. It took 20 goods and services firms assessed as having strong export potential through a 15-month development process with the ultimate goal of preparing them for EU export, whether now or in the future. Now, these 20 firms were at different stages of development. So for some, EU exports were in their crosshairs, and for others, it was a north-south. Now, the project therefore strove to advance each company along their individual growth pathway with the goal of creating a pipeline of export-ready firms able to successfully penetrate the EU market. Now, while we discovered that many gaps were quite common among the firms and were treated through group capacity building interventions, firms also received one-on-one guidance and support to navigate the challenges and opportunities unique to them. Now, this is our opportunity to share our experience in this project with you, so that those of you who are interested in the journey to becoming exporters to the EU have understanding of both the export opportunities in these markets, as well as what it will take to leverage those opportunities for success. We want you to walk away from this session with a greater understanding of the opportunities, challenges, requirements, and pathways to doing business in the EU. Now, while each market is unique, and the EU certainly is, you will find that much of the information and guidance provided here is applicable to your export development, irrespective of your target market or stage of readiness. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll get right into it. And so I'm going to introduce you now to Ms. Hannah Volk, the lead consultant of Market Scoping International, or MSI, to weave the tale of our journey of getting fit for Europe. So let me tell you a bit about Hannah for context. So Hannah Volk is the director of MSI, or Market Scoping International, a UK-based research and business design consultancy established in 1995, which specializes in creating, implementing, and evaluating strategy based on innovation and insight. Hannah started her career at CV Associates, followed by RS Consulting London, rising to the position of senior research executive. Now, while at RS Consulting, she was a project manager for a range of research services to Hewlett-Packard, Xerox, Motorola, the UK government, delivering quantitative and qualitative as well as desk research projects in the UK and Europe, including Russia, Germany, Portugal, France, Italy, and Spain. Now, while at RS, Hannah became an associate member of the Market Research Society. Hannah has worked on all of MSI's projects and assignments since 2006 and took on the directorship and running of MSI in 2021. Hannah is driven by delivering tangible impact for clients through the development of innovative strategy and capacity building. Thank you for being with us, Hannah. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mandisa. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being with us today in this session, and also joining us live through Facebook, or maybe watching later on. Bear with me one moment while I share my presentation with you. Great. Hopefully everyone can see. So, first of all, I would like to start just by taking a brief look at what we're going to cover in the session today. We're going to start by looking at the opportunity Europe represents for services exporters from Trinidad and Tobago. We're then going to take a deep dive into the Fit for Europe 2 programme, looking at how the programme unfolded, the support the companies participating in the programme have received in terms of capacity building to prepare them to reach our markets of focus, and why. We'll provide an overview of our findings coming out of matchmaking meetings, which we organise with potential European partners for those most export-ready companies taking part in the programme, and also the coaching and mentoring sessions, which all companies have benefited from. This information will hopefully help other companies looking to target European markets to understand market expectations and requirements and what work is needed prior to considering export to European markets. And finally, we will focus on lessons learned or key takeaways and the impact of the Fit for Europe 2 programme to date. The focus for the Fit for Europe 2 programme was to build our participating exporters' capacity for European market access, with a specific focus on Germany and Sweden. The European Union or EU, comprised of 27 member states, is the world's largest single market. It's home to 448 million people. It's responsible for 16% of the world's imports and exports, and it's rich in commercial opportunities. The EPA between the EU and CARIFORUM states grants duty and quota-free access for all goods coming from CARIFORUM states, and it also includes commitments on trade in services, investment, and trade-related issues, amongst other things. This opportunity and the enhanced access provided by the EPA represents a strong growth opportunity for goods and services companies from Trinidad and Tobago. Whilst the opportunity is clear, there are also significant challenges facing Trinidad and Tobago companies looking to access European markets. European markets are geographically and psychologically distant. Competition is fierce and standards are extremely high. Companies looking to target European partners need to be aware of the cultural nuances of the specific country they're targeting, ensure they are fully aware of and up to date with EU and country-specific compliance for their products or services of focus, and that they are adequately prepared in terms of risk management, product and service readiness, and have done their research and due diligence on the opportunity and the potential target partners. Whilst the European market is harmonised in many respects, each member country has its own identity, cultural norms, quirks, opportunities, and challenges. And if you were listening to the talk given by Jason Lindsay prior to this, even within each company, within each country, there are also significant differences. Individual countries also have their own legislation and regulation, which sits alongside EU harmonised legislation. Companies need to be export ready, smart, and strategic with contemporary business models. In a market focused on quality, smart specialisation is key. We're going to hear more about this later. It's of vital importance that companies are targeted and specific. Companies that succeed in the EU have absolute clarity on who, when, where, and how. They focus on outputs and not activities. They understand the power of partnerships, the importance of persistence. They're prepared and they're able to adapt, to respond, and provide solutions to problems and opportunities. They are focused and they have passion and drive. They need to build trust with partners and customers and adapt to markets. They can't expect the markets to adapt to them. Over the last 4 years since the Fit for Europe 1 programme, exporting has changed. We've seen a period of export innovation, demographic change, new business models creating a new playing field, a situation where large and small companies have much greater reach and connectivity. But the harsh reality is that whilst there is increased opportunity, there is also increased global competition to succeed in EU markets, and more demanding and discerning European partners. Drivers of change include sustainability, both environmental and economic, virtual platforms, the phenomenon of micro-multinationals, the third generation of BSOs and exporters, and the dynamics and new opportunities created by cross-border clusters in Europe. As I've said, the focus for the Fit for Europe 2 programme was on European market entry, with a specific focus on Germany and Sweden. We're going to take a brief look at each of these countries, just to provide you with an overview of the opportunity before we look in more detail at the Fit for Europe 2 programme itself. Germany is a country of contrasts. It's home to mountain ranges, castles perched high above wide flowing rivers, and extensive forests which cover 33% of the country. It's a country with a strong focus on nature, renewable energy, and conservation. It's also the industrial heartland of Europe. 7.5 million employees worked in the manufacturing sector in 2020. That's more than the entire population of Denmark. It's home to sprawling factories like the Wolfsburg Volkswagen factory, which is one of the largest manufacturing plants in the world at 70 million square feet. These photographs give you a little insight into the many faces of Germany. So as we can see here, Germany is located right at the centre of Europe. With a population of 83 million people, Germany is the largest consumer market in Europe and the fourth largest market in the world. It's the third largest importer in the world, and English is widely spoken. The volume of trade, number of consumers, and Germany's geographic location at the centre of the EU makes it an important market for exporters. Germany rebounded quickly from the economic impact of the pandemic, and whilst conflict in the Ukraine has slowed GDP growth, it's still a stable economy with a developed and reliable infrastructure. An important fact about Germany is that it has a federal system comprised of 16 Länder or federal states, which have their own parliament, constitution, and government, with autonomy over a number of areas. Each has a representative at the central government, and this map shows the different Länder and also the principal cities in Germany. Germany ranked 8th out of 132 economies in the 2023 Global Innovation Index. One of Germany's key strengths is the translation of scientific research into practical applications, which has been encouraged by the German government, which looks to support the development of new disruptive innovations. Also of note are bilateral relations between Trinidad and Tobago and Germany. Aside from the EPA, German companies have to date made more than 4 billion euros worth of investments in Trinidad and Tobago, including a large plant construction in the petrochemical sector. There are higher education partnerships between the University of the West Indies and German universities, including Flensburg, Dresden, Wolfenbüttel, and Kiel. In addition to that, Tobago is a popular destination for German tourists, which make up the third largest group of visitors after the British and Canadians. Let's take a look at Sweden. Sweden covers a huge area. Forests cover half of the country, and the country is home to over 100,000 lakes, 24,000 islands, and 29 national parks. During the summer months in Sweden's Arctic north, the sun never sets. Even in Stockholm in the south, nights only last 4 hours, and average temperatures hover around 25 degrees centigrade. By contrast, during the winter, which lasts until May, nights are long and days are short. In the north, average temperatures can dip as low as -16 degrees centigrade. Sweden's rich natural resources, forests, ore deposits, and hydroelectric power are the foundation of its industrial success. However, in recent years, the focus has shifted towards innovation, products, and services. The country excels at integrating digital technologies and adopting sustainable industrial ecosystems and value chains. Located in the north of Europe, Sweden is the largest country in Scandinavia. But with a population of 10.42 million, it's also one of the least populated countries in Europe. The country is a constitutional monarchy and a parliamentary democracy, with a head of government, the Prime Minister, and a head of state, the monarch. Public-private partnership is at the centre of the Swedish model, developed by the Social Democrats, who have governed more or less continuously since the 1920s. Sweden is one of the most innovative, competitive, and transparent countries in the world, with few barriers to entry. In 2022, Sweden was ranked as the fourth most competitive country in the World Competitiveness Rankings. Sweden has high taxes and a generous welfare programme. Its economy remained relatively robust during and after the coronavirus pandemic, but it's currently going through a period of economic contraction due to high inflation. The most widely spoken foreign language in Sweden is English, which is spoken by 90% of the population. And while Sweden is a member of the EU, it has not adopted the common currency, and so Sweden's currency remains the Swedish krona. Sweden's principal cities, as you'll be able to see, are pinpointed on this map. Sweden is an environmental pioneer. Around 60% of Sweden's national energy supply comes from renewables, and legislation has been passed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions further. The Swedish government aims to be fossil-free by 2045, using 100% renewable energy sources. The country is also a centre for environmental research, and it has emphasised that green growth can drive transition through technical innovation. Sweden ranked second out of 132 economies in the 2023 Global Innovation Index. Sweden is a powerhouse of innovation in Europe. This is partly due to the close cooperation between the business sector, academia, and government. The government has an innovation agency called Vinnova, and it is investing significantly in innovation infrastructure. Sweden has bilateral relations with Trinidad and Tobago through the EPA. So that's just a little brief introduction to the German and Swedish markets. I will be providing you with some more information on doing business in Germany and Sweden as we look in more depth at the Fit for Europe 2 programme. I'm going to talk a little bit now about the Fit for Europe 2 programme. The aim of the programme was to work with 20 Trinidad and Tobago goods and services companies to develop their export readiness for European markets, with a specific focus, as we've heard, on Germany and Sweden. Now for the most export ready, and into the future for those just starting out on their export journey or currently focused on regional or nearshore export, through a capacity building programme. It was expected that women-owned, led, and micro and small and medium-sized enterprises should be well represented amongst the cohort. Our goal was to help the participating companies to develop in a long-term sustainable way, to provide them with the necessary training, tools, and confidence to approach and grow in new markets, long beyond the time constraints of the programme. So how did we select the companies participating in the programme? Export TT received over 100 submitted applications from companies wishing to take part. From these applications, a shortlist of 40 was formulated. We then undertook individual interviews with the shortlisted candidates in order to narrow down to 20 selected companies. The companies were selected based on rigorous assessment, which looked to identify companies with demonstrated commitment, competitive edge, track record, growth potential, capacity, fit with programme objectives, current fit or potential fit for European markets, and that all-important factor X, attitude, energy, and ability to drive growth. The selected companies were segmented into 3 tiers. And I'm going to be referring to these throughout the presentation, so let's have a look at this now. MSI's 3-tier model for company export classification is progressive, it's differentiated, and it's inclusive. Each company was assessed and segmented in terms of their level of export readiness for European markets. Tier 3 companies are young but proven companies with internationally appealing products and services, yet to develop significant, consistent, established export regionally or internationally. Tier 2 companies are experienced in exporting regionally, but they have the potential to grow in wider international markets. And Tier 1 companies are those international exporters who are already internationally competitive. Our goal in the programme was to progress companies in each tier to move upwards to the next level or levels, depending on their individual goals, ambition, and capacity. This is the Fit for Europe 2 cohort. You can see that we had 8 Tier 1 companies, 7 Tier 2 companies, and 5 Tier 3 companies on the programme. Our companies are a mix of goods and services companies. To give you a sense of the services companies we were working with, we had 4 fashion companies, Heather Jones International, Loud by Afia, Individual Aesthetic, and Zidell, a Calypso jazz group, Dominant Seventh, a television programme, Bling My Wedding, an external development and video game studio, Coded Arts, a research consultancy company, Lucent, and a company with a focus on alternative energy education, Nuance Solar. Our goal for the Fit for Europe 2 programme was to work with these selected companies to provide capacity building to improve their export readiness for international markets. For Tier 2 and Tier 3 companies, those goals were typically to target regional and US markets as a first or growing step to European export, whilst for the Tier 1 companies, their focus was on European markets and more specifically Germany and Sweden, which were the 2 target markets selected by Export TT as the markets of focus for the programme. As part of the programme, the Tier 1 companies benefited additionally from scheduled matchmaking meetings organised in the target European markets. We will discuss this in detail a little bit later on during the presentation. As this slide shows, 11 out of 20 of the participating companies are women-owned or led companies. So what was the focus of our capacity building programme? What did it look like? Following the selection stage, we assessed each company's individual capacity building needs. Individual plans were created for each company, describing their capacity building needs and how these would be addressed throughout the life cycle of the programme. The key takeaway here is that going into these capacity building needs assessments, we anticipated that the needs of the companies would be quite individual and that the support provided would be by and large delivered on an individual basis. But during our analysis, it became very clear that there were 7 distinct areas of capacity building need, which were shared by all companies on the programme. Brand positioning. So all companies needed to undertake work around brand positioning and brand story. A significant challenge for all of the companies looking to target European markets is a lack of brand recognition in the non-diaspora space. Companies needed to develop brand identity presentations and or look at brand identity in the light of how that might be perceived within different cultural contexts. Next, we looked at the development of overarching and market-specific strategies for export. In terms of risk management, having a robust strategic export plan in place is essential. All companies needed to develop or update or articulate their overarching export strategy before moving on to develop individual strategies for specific markets of focus. Aftercare strategies are an essential tool to build brand presence, to gain traction in target markets, and to grow market share and brand presence into the future. Development of outreach strategies for export. Outreach strategies are essential in order for companies to connect to new markets, build brand presence, and gain traction in those new markets. We worked with companies to develop pitch documents and strategies for outreach, and also visibility and brand awareness. Market insight, knowledge, intelligence, benchmarking, and bench learning was another key area of capacity building. For all companies looking to target European markets, undertaking research and gathering insight and intelligence is directly intertwined with market access success. All of the Fit for Europe 2 cohort identified this as a key gap and need going into the programme. Risk management. So exporting involves significant investment, both financially and in terms of time and commitment. It's essential that all companies approach export with a risk management mindset. Whilst it's impossible to eradicate risk, it was extremely important to us to focus on steps that companies can take in order to minimise that risk. And so we undertook a capacity building intervention, looking at ways risk could be mitigated against when approaching European markets. And finally, pitching. We undertook a group workshop on pitching and connecting to European partners. Following this, in preparation for their mission meetings, the Tier 1 companies were asked to practice their pitch on 4 members of the MSI team and were provided with feedback on their approach. The overarching goal of our capacity building interventions was to achieve long-term impact for the companies through acquired skills, tools, information, perspective, and mindset change, which would help companies to achieve export growth now and into the future. To address the areas of shared capacity building need, group workshops were organised on each topic and follow-up tasks were set for the companies to complete. In addition to this, companies have benefited from scheduled one-to-one coaching and mentoring sessions with MSI and ad hoc support and coaching as requested or needed. The purpose of these sessions was to ensure that companies were able to take on board the lessons learned during the workshops and tasks set and embed these into their operating models. We wanted to ensure that the capacity building programme was not just an academic exercise, but would deliver real impact. During the course of the programme, we've built strong working relationships with each participating company, allowing us to work closely with them to address barriers and challenges faced and to assess export growth opportunities. We've also encouraged the companies to work collaboratively with each other to share their experiences and lessons learned. There is so much that can be collectively gained from working together. I'm going to take a little bit of a closer look at these areas of capacity building to summarise the key takeaways, which hopefully will be helpful for other Trinidad and Tobago companies targeting European or indeed international or regional export. Throughout the programme, a running theme has been the importance of adopting a risk-managed approach to export. Export involves significant investment in terms of time, personnel, and financial input. Some exporters do dive in, they take risks, and they work it out as they go along. But get it wrong, and the long-term consequences can be significant. It can set back export efforts and cause damage to your company and its reputation. Entry to new markets always comes with risk. New operating environments, new consumer profiles, cultures, business practices, legal frameworks, and cost of doing business, to name but a few. But they shouldn't be seen as barriers to entry. But in order to mitigate against these risks, it's essential for all exporters to adopt a data and fact-based risk management strategy, which has been developed taking into consideration due diligence and market testing. Companies should enter into the export process with their eyes open to pursue export in a considered, thought-out way based on a risk-managed approach. The starting point for those new to export or to an export market is evaluation. There are some key questions companies need to ask themselves. Are your goals realistic? Are you ready? Do you have the resources and the commitment to support export activity? What are your skills and your knowledge gaps? How are you going to overcome barriers to export in terms of language difference, currency exchange, cultural difference, securing payment in a timely manner, and delivery cycles? These questions should be addressed prior to export and then continuously reassessed, because markets are also continuously changing, presenting both new opportunities and risks. Companies need to be open and objective. Your strength will come from acknowledging your weaknesses and finding solutions to address them. We've already touched on the importance of research and insight in doing business in new markets. It should go without saying that in entering or thinking about entering any new market, research is absolutely key. In an increasingly accessible world, it's easy to make the mistake that we understand other countries and how they work, particularly if you're targeting territories you are already familiar with or have strong links to. Assumptions, though, can lead to costly errors and missed opportunities. When considering any new market, it's essential to look at it with fresh eyes. Do your research to critically review and assess the fit with the potential export destination based on facts and data and not feelings. Research and analysis will help you to understand if there's a potential fit for your service and how it should be positioned. The same research might also bring to light new opportunities which you've not previously considered and help you to understand and respond to consumer tastes and differences in terms of your offer. Finally, understanding cultural differences is crucial to pitching services in an effective and appropriate way and to get your messaging right. The feedback we have had from the companies participating in the programme is that the information provided on Europe, Germany and Sweden was one of the most valued areas of capacity building during the programme. There are 4 key areas where research and insight plays an important role: market insight, competitor insight, customer insight, and partner identification. During our capacity building, we looked at each of these areas in detail, providing relevant information on Germany and Sweden and identifying where companies could access this information for other markets of interest. In terms of generating market insight or an overview of a new geographic market, we encouraged companies to undertake a market survey or profiling of the target geographical market. We've already had a look at some of this information earlier in our profiles on Germany and Sweden. The profiling should include as a minimum geographical data, including key cities, time zone, currency, information on the country's political system, economy, demographics, so population size and distribution, regulation, compliance, quality standards, if relevant, packaging and labelling requirements, tariffs and taxes, ease of doing business and distribution networks, areas of strength and innovation, existing trade agreements and support organisations. These were all key areas where companies felt they had knowledge gaps, particularly around compliance, packaging and labelling. I'm going to take a little bit of time here to look at some of the information provided during the programme, as I know that for many listening today, this will be information of interest. In the EU, it's a legal obligation of organisations to comply with all export regulations and compliance requirements that are relevant to the jurisdictions where they do business. It's essential to have a full, granular understanding of the regulations and compliance requirements that relate to the export of your services to your target country as early on in the process as possible. Failing to do so can be costly. Once you do have and you do understand the necessary requirements for you as a business, don't stop there. ensure that all of your staff are up to date on regulations and obligations, maintain an audit trail of export compliance certification, and stay ahead of the curve. Ensure you are aware of incoming compliance regulation and that you have adequate time to prepare for it. Don't rely on partners in country to keep you up to date on this in a timely way. Some partners may be proactive in terms of keeping you updated, others less so, but ultimately it's your responsibility. There are, of course, specific regulation and compliance which must be adhered to depending on sector or European market of focus. But I'm going to just run through some of the general regulation and compliance you should be aware of when exporting to Europe. In order for products like garments to enter the European market and move freely around it, they must meet requirements which have been harmonised among EU members by common EU legislation. The export process involves acquiring the following documentation. A single administrative document, or SAD. This is the Common Import Declaration Form for all EU member states. A commercial invoice, which contains the basic information on the transaction and is always required for customs clearance. A customs value declaration must be presented if products exceed 20,000 euros. Transport documents are required, and this could be a bill of landing, roadway bill, airway bill, or railway bill, amongst others. An insurance invoice is required for customs clearance when the relevant data is not included in the commercial invoice. And finally, the packing list provides information on the imported items and the packaging details of each shipment. It's required for customs clearance as an inventory of the incoming cargo. For the purposes of this presentation, we are skimming through these requirements in order just to provide a high-level overview, but more in-depth information is available. Goods arriving at the Customs Office of Entry to the EU are placed in temporary storage until they are assigned a customs procedure. That could be that they are released for free circulation, for union transit, for storage, for specific use, for processing, or it could just be that they are re-exported. There are specific restrictions relating to postal consignments, internet orders from outside the EU, and again, further information on this is available. The EU has a number of standards and regulations which exporters must adhere to. There are individual quality standards set for some specific products and services, but all products on the EU market for consumers, including all products that provide a service, must comply with Directive 2001/95/EC, which protects consumer health and safety. Germany follows the trade standards of the EU. There are a small number of organisations that monitor and manage general standards in Germany, which are listed below. Sweden complies with EU legislation on general standards. The Swedish Standards Federation is responsible for managing the registration of Swedish standards and approving standardizations in bodies in Sweden. Standardization is undertaken by 3 accredited bodies: the SIS, the ITS, and the SEK. Another key area for compliance in the EU is sustainability. For companies approaching or looking to approach European markets, I cannot overestimate the importance of demonstrating and articulating a commitment to environment, sustainability, and personal and social responsibility. In the shifting dynamics of the European business landscape, it is vital that Trinidad and Tobago exporting companies are able to point to and demonstrate their ethical standpoint and commitment to green and social responsibility issues. The EU's Green Deal has been proposed in response to climate and environmental challenges. It's an integral part of the UN's 2030 Agenda and UN Sustainable Development Goals. It establishes the EU's ambition to be an international leader in the green transition. It puts sustainability at the heart of EU policy making. Its purpose is to cement the values of sustainability throughout the EU, requiring that all EU action and policies must work towards the sustainable future of the EU. The implications of this are significant because it means that all aspects of EU policy and law on any subject or topic will need to be filtered by the Green Deal. And this will result in huge changes in terms of compliance that will ultimately influence businesses across the world. How does it relate to you? And why should Trinidad and Tobago companies be concerned about this? Well, the Green Deal does and will affect due diligence. Due diligence in this context is the process through which companies can identify, prevent, and mitigate and account for how they address their actual, potential, and adverse impacts as an integral part of business decision-making and risk management systems. So, what that means in practice is that these international principles and guidelines, which have already been incorporated into EU regulation, are now going to, in the future, shift from a voluntary compliance with due diligence to mandatory due diligence for EU companies, and crucially, those companies that work with them. Companies operating within the EU will need to officially submit information on their environmental due diligence, which will also include the environmental due diligence of their supply chain. There will be opportunities for companies because of the Green Deal. The global demand for environmentally sustainable services is going to increase. European partners are looking to build relationships with companies who have adopted demonstrable sustainable practices. It's really important that companies are transparent and able to back up any claims. There's currently anti-greenwashing legislation in place, but in 2025, the green claims legislation will mean that any environmental marketing claims will be submitted for third-party verification. EU companies must gather information on their supply chain and their value chain. In order for them to be transparent, they will need full information from their suppliers. So Trinidad and Tobago companies looking to export to Europe need to be proactive. They shouldn't wait. Legislation is not all in place yet, but the demand on a consumer and business level in Europe is clear. Consumers and business partners want to do business with companies who can demonstrate an ethical and sustainable footprint. A key area to research and understand is the business culture of the market you're looking to enter. How do people operate? What are the expectations in terms of doing business? And how should you interact with business partners? In order to avoid misunderstandings and to ensure you're informed and able to adapt to local business culture, it's important to understand business etiquette, communication, organizational hierarchy, and business practice. As with any market, there are a number of cultural considerations to take into account when doing business in Germany. Punctuality is important, and times for meetings must be set in advance and adhered to. German meetings don't usually include small talk, and personal topics of conversation should be avoided. German business meetings tend to be formal, with executives addressing each other with their formal titles. In drawing up contracts, it's worth noting that once a contract has been signed, compliance with its regulation is mandatory, and any changes are regarded as unprofessional. It's really important to carefully consider where and how the product or service will be delivered prior to drawing up contracts. In Germany, quality is of the utmost importance, and it takes priority over speed of delivery. Again, this should be borne in mind prior to stipulating timescales for delivery. Set realistic timescales that can be adhered to and that don't affect the quality of the service being offered. The German mindset values detail, order, and structure. Be prepared that contracts will be discussed in some detail with contingency planning put in place. Again, as with Germany, there are a number of cultural considerations which should be taken into account when doing business with Sweden. By contrast to Germany, Swedes tend to be informal in business meetings, addressing each other by first names rather than titles. Small talk is not normally engaged in during business meetings. Decisions are rarely made at first meetings. Decisions are generally made by consensus, which can be a time-consuming process involving multiple meetings to reach decisions. Swedish organisations are egalitarian, with little attention given to hierarchy. Around a table during a meeting, consideration will be equally given to junior staff members' input as seniors. Swedes are also interested in detail and will ask lots of questions. There's a very strong culture and focus on modesty. It's so important not to be seen to be bragging about your company's achievements. Modesty and low profile are key. The concept of working in partnerships to create collaborative and cooperative relationships is very important. And it's worth noting that June, July, and August, late February to March, are all holiday periods in Sweden, and doing business during these periods can be more challenging. The minimum annual leave entitlement for full-time employees is 25 days a year plus 9 public holidays, giving a total of 34. And employees have a legal right to take off 4 weeks of holiday in a row, which many do take in the summer months. As a result of that, the summer months are very challenging times to do business because business decisions are just generally not taken during that time. Punctuality is really important, and lateness is seen as discourteous and unprofessional. Punctuality typically means being a few minutes early for internal meetings and between 5 and 10 minutes early for external meetings. Also, achieving a good work-life balance is really important in Sweden. Working overtime on a regular basis is seen as a lack of competence or a lack of organisational skills rather than a dedication to the role. Less than 1% of Swedish employees work overtime. There is also a strong focus on well-being. There's a tradition of fika in the workplace, a collective coffee break where colleagues stop work to share coffee and pastries together. It's not a time to speak about work issues, but a time to get to know each other, to unwind and relax. Sweden is one of the least corrupt countries in the world, and there is strong public opinion against all kinds of corruption. So, having focused on researching compliance and regulation, we also encouraged our participating companies to research competitors, undertaking benchmarking and bench learning exercises to enable them to compete more effectively in their target markets, to identify opportunities and gaps as well as potential hazards. By scoping the competitive landscape, companies are able to understand what works, what doesn't, where the gaps are, and how to position themselves effectively within that market. It helps companies to answer the questions on whether they can compete in terms of pricing and positioning, to narrow down to who their target customers are, to gain real clarity on their additionality and what they bring to the table in that specific market. We talked about the importance of customer and partner insight. Gaining a deep understanding of target customers or partners in any market is crucially important. It's necessary in terms of understanding the fit for a product or service and whether it needs to be adapted. Customer profiling also helps companies to understand how to position their service and how to ensure marketing strategies are tailored and impactful, and to reach the audience most likely to convert into customers. Finally, and a really important one, obviously, research and insight plays an enormous role in identifying potential partners. We looked at how companies can identify and connect to potential partners in Germany and Sweden, including chambers of commerce, trade associations and business councils, business support organisations, online research and external support. It's also extremely important in undertaking due diligence on potential partners which have been identified. We encouraged companies to research potential partners, profile them, read reviews if applicable, search for news stories and look at turnover and credit scores as preliminary checks which should take place. In order to develop export strategies, companies must have absolute clarity on who they are, their goals, their aims, and their objectives, and the face they are going to present to new target markets. This needs to be clear from the outset and should drive decision-making. And this is particularly true for companies targeting non-diaspora European markets. Many companies looking to target European or UK markets focus on targeting diaspora markets. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with this as a market entry strategy. In fact, of risk management, it can be a good starting point. But even for companies whose plan is to target diaspora markets in the first instance, their strategy should account for and plan for that next step. If they're entering into a new market and they want to market their services to customers who have no idea who they are and have never heard of the brand, it doesn't matter if they are a household name with decades of goodwill and customer relations under their belt in Trinidad and Tobago, or if they were established 2 years ago. Put it into context, the population of Europe is 448 million people. In 2019, a study was done which estimated that across Europe, 4.64 million people were born in Latin America and the Caribbean. Granted, it doesn't count the second and third generation members of the diaspora living in Europe with really strong cultural connections to their family's country of origin, but it just gives you a sense of the numbers. The importance of brand positioning for international markets cannot be underestimated, and it has to be the starting point for the development of any clearly defined, articulated, market-specific export strategy. Having clarity on brand identity, who the company is, what it represents, the values it stands for and the ethos it holds is vitally important, particularly in European export markets. Brand identity well articulated will help customers in European markets to build trust, loyalty, and a connection with the business, ultimately motivating them to purchase the services being marketed. A strong brand identity will help companies to gain traction once established in market and assist in the brand building process. It will make them a more attractive proposition to potential partners. And at the same time, internally, defining the brand and the brand values will help to ground and drive business strategy and assist with decision making. It has to be the starting point for all strategic thinking. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but brand identity should stand on 4 key pillars, which are company purpose, value proposition, ethos, and personality. In identifying and articulating these 4 pillars, companies need to be true to who they are and what they represent. They mustn't position their company as something it's not, just to slot into an attractive niche market, because this is only going to lose them credibility and weaken their brand. Brand identity is about authenticity. It's how the company wishes to present the brand to the world. And whilst the way this is conveyed might need to change depending on specific markets and cultures, the identity itself should be consistent across all markets. During the capacity building workshop, we drilled down into each of these elements, providing guidance to the companies on how to articulate and define their brand identity, and tasked the companies with creating a brand identity presentation, which was then peer reviewed at a second workshop. We supported the companies in developing these presentations, which have become part of their essential exporters toolkit. Having an up-to-date, articulated, overarching export strategy helps companies to prioritise their efforts, to allocate resources, to measure progress, and improves company cohesion. Most importantly, a clearly defined export strategy helps companies to be proactive rather than reactive, to focus on opportunities aligned with their company's wider goals, and importantly, to turn down opportunities which are not. Having a well-developed strategy is essential for building long-term export growth. For all companies exporting or thinking about exporting to Europe, there's a need for a strategic shift in line with market changes driven by new business models, supply and value chains, and communication technologies, which are both enabling and disruptive. This environment requires a fresh approach, a new mindset, and a commitment to continuous design and development of export strategies, products, and services, with an increased focus on additionality, the added value of services and how these are presented, and co-creation, new approaches to working with EU partners. Additionality and co-creation have become dominant themes in replacing the traditional exporter models. And we're going to talk a little bit more about these a little later in the presentation. An overarching export strategy should articulate company goals, export goals, service of focus for export markets of focus, and a timeline for strategy implementation. Next, we focused on capacity building around developing market-specific export strategies. Each target geographical market a company is looking to build export relationships in should have a well-defined export strategy, which is regularly updated and shared with members of the team. These strategy documents should include market insight, a definition of the opportunity, identification of services of focus, market positioning, market entry strategy, logistics plan, financial plan, risk management strategy, aftercare strategy, and projected timelines and milestones. Companies also need to identify partner and, if relevant, again, thinking about fashion here, distributor criteria. This needs to be proactive in nature, looking at the necessary attributes they require in a future partner and how they will screen potential partners, as well as how they want to work with potential partners in a mutually beneficial approach. The focus now in Europe is strongly on co-creation. The old model of seller-purchaser relationship has morphed into something more nuanced. Companies are seeking partners with whom they can build mutually beneficial relationships. Of course, companies need to establish a financial strategy for any target markets, identifying goals for sales, turnover, and profit, and allocating budget to export activity. They need to have a deep understanding of export costs and finance available to dedicate to that export activity. A pricing strategy needs to be developed which takes into account currency shifts and variations, tariffs and taxes, logistics and insurance costs, IP protection, and any agency or partner fees. Ensuring that the pricing strategy will maximise sales in the market is realistic and will generate their required margin. And of course, payment methods and terms need to be considered. In any strategy, risk management needs to be taken into account with a focus on political risk, legal risk, currency fluctuation, logistics risks, and non-payment. And then finally, a market-specific export strategy should include a staged 3-year plan with identified milestones, targets, and KPIs, which will allow companies to monitor, track, and evaluate progress. The focus for our capacity building on communication and outreach was to encourage companies to develop outreach and communication strategies, to provide them with insight on digital marketing strategies in Europe, Germany, and Sweden, and to develop appropriate pitch documents for outreach. The rationale for developing strategic plans for communications and outreach is to ensure that messaging is consistent with brand and services, that companies are able to effectively reach and connect to their target customers or partners, that outreach and engagement is focused on meaningful impact, and the objectives can be measured and evaluated. It's not enough just to formulate brand identity. Companies need to develop a strategy to reach their target audience and to tell that story in order to gain traction in their target markets. For companies looking to target European markets, it's important to develop a suite of documents prior to pitch. Brand identity presentation, overarching export strategy, market-specific export strategy, a company one-pager, and a pitch presentation developed with a specific potential partner in mind. Most initial meetings with companies in Europe are likely to take place virtually, and it's important that companies are well prepared and have relevant presentations to hand. European partners like to see data and facts visually presented, and having these documents prepared are an indication of professionalism and will help to build trust. One of our goals for the programme was for all companies to develop a company one-pager. This is exactly as described. It's a single A4 page that encompasses what a company does and or what a particular product or service the company has developed can offer. It's a snapshot into the business which can be attached to an initial contact email to prospective partners, allowing time-poor potential partners to quickly understand the business, the offer, and whether it could be of value to them to pursue the contact further. The document should be simple, clear, and take no more than 2 or 3 minutes to read. It should be visually simple, yet appealing, combining text and visuals, and be approachable. Here we have Heather Jones International and Coded Arts' Company One pages by way of an example. Our final group workshop was on pitching and aftercare, looking at how to go about pitching to European markets with a specific focus on Germany and Sweden. We also covered the topic of aftercare, looking at how to grow relationships once established and into the future. One of the key learnings for the companies was to address the mindset that pitching starts and ends with the act of delivering a sales pitch. This is a very narrow perspective on the process and one in which companies are unlikely to achieve success in European markets. Pitching is a process. It's the process of interacting with a potential partner with the aim of achieving or growing a business relationship. It begins with the very first contact, and in dynamic, successful B2B relationships, the process of pitching never ends. It's a continuum. Because in order to sustain and grow relationships, ongoing conversations about partner needs and solutions, innovations in services and product portfolios should continue to take place after a business relationship has been established. In terms of the pitching process, there are a number of key steps, and we looked at all of these stages in detail. What I want to emphasize is the importance of considering cultural nuances and etiquette. Again, we spent quite some time looking at the cultural differences between Germany and Sweden and business etiquette in both countries to ensure our participating companies were clear on the different approaches required in each country. This was important because getting this wrong could close the door to prospective partners who represent growth opportunities. It's very important that companies do not attempt to sell in European markets. Companies should be assured and confident in their product or service and avoid marketing language. Facts and data are extremely important. That is what will speak to companies and impress them. Companies need to be deliberate and they need to be precise. Marketing spiel or flowery language will not go down well in European markets. Also important to take into consideration is that no decisions will be taken in a first meeting and partners will be put off by an overly pushy approach. Companies should aim for meetings just to flow as a conversation, not a presentation. A presentation should be prepared, but this should fit within or be followed by a conversation. The aim of a first meeting is simply to open a dialogue. Once companies have established a foothold in new export markets, the key to continued and lasting success is the proven and demonstrable ability of exporters to retain and develop their client base through progressive, responsive, and effective client aftercare plans. Client aftercare plans differ from client management. There is crossover, but client management focuses on fulfilling the contractual agreement you have in place with that client, whereas aftercare relates to growing and developing that relationship further. Client aftercare has always been a feature and often the defining characteristic of successful exporters. Sales to existing customers remains the predominant source of growth in exporting to international partners markets. The goal for international exporters should be to develop long-term sustainable relationships with partners which continue to grow and to develop over time. A recent study has found that, on average, long-term relationships established in the first year of exporting to a new geographical market account for more than half of export values 9 years later. This implies that successful growth in an export market is explained by an exporter's ability to retain and expand key relationships established in the first year of activity in that market. Aftercare is particularly key for Trinidad and Tobago companies operating in European markets, where developing relationships and building a client base in the first instance takes significant investment in terms of time and resource. Long-term trusted relationships developed with international business partners will provide valuable insight. These strong relationships will also be more resilient in the face of market shocks and exchange rate crises. Businesses with whom companies have a symbiotic relationship will more often than not want to work with them to weather these storms. Each aftercare program is unique and there is no set formula, but companies should think about how they will work with partners to support growth in market. In the case of fashion companies, it might be sales activities, marketing and promotional events, or for all companies, the development of their offer based on market feedback. Companies need to think about how they can support their export partner to win business, retain business, and grow business. It's not enough to just sit back and see what happens. They need to work with their partner to help drive that process. So that was a not so brief overview of the capacity building programme for the Fit for Europe 2 cohort. In addition to the capacity building program, Tier 1 companies benefited from researched and organised matchmaking meetings with potential partners and key industry contacts in Germany and Sweden, with the goal of assisting them in furthering their strategic plans for export to Europe. There was unfortunately a delay in this process, which led to challenges scheduling company meetings, as we then found ourselves looking to book meetings during the summer holiday period in Germany and Sweden. As we've seen, July and August are challenging times to do business in these countries, as many take significant periods of annual leave during this time. So for this reason, we were given an extension to the project, meaning that the programme is now due to close at the end of this month rather than the end of August as originally planned. I want to have a look at numbers to give you an idea of the outreach needed to take place in order to secure meetings. By way of an example, for one of our services companies, MSI reached out to 144 companies in Germany and 117 companies in Sweden, all of whom represented a strategic fit. We received 47 emails demonstrating no interest in the company, 4 companies who have added the company to their potential supplier database, and 200 non-responses from our initial email outreach. There were also 10 B2B meetings which were scheduled, and these meetings have been extremely fruitful. But I highlight these figures as it's indicative of the challenge companies generally face in terms of outreach to prospective partners, and the time, the persistence, and the resilience that's required to achieve meaningful connections. There have been some great outcomes for both goods and services companies from the matchmaking meetings to date. A contract already offered, potential contracts being discussed, a number of potential distributors going through internal checks by our companies before moving to next steps, offers to speak at conferences and events, discussions of cross-border collaborations, exchange programs, the potential for one of our services companies to become a European body ambassador for Trinidad and Tobago. Heather Jones International is preparing for a fashion show in October in London to launch their European market entry, and many relationships have begun and will be continued to be built upon. We are, of course, in the early stages of seeing where these business relationships will develop and grow to, and the true assessment of their impact will be in the months that follow the programme. Our services companies did not receive any constructive feedback during B2B meetings with potential partners. No challenges or barriers to future partnerships were highlighted by way of their potential partners. By their potential partners and industry contacts. But I want to talk about this briefly here because negative or constructive feedback is an inevitability for companies at some point during export market outreach. And it's something which was experienced by a number of our goods companies. Constructive feedback is key market insight in terms of opportunity analysis, and it should always be viewed as such by companies targeting prospective partners. It shouldn't be seen as negative. If there are challenges with a particular market, with the fit of your company's services, if a particular sector is struggling, it's really important to gain, to understand, and to utilise this insight in strategic planning and service development. Let's review some of the lessons learned from the matchmaking meetings. For services companies, when targeting potential partners, it's important not just to focus on B2B buyer-seller relationships, but also to focus on developing relationships with organisations and companies who can assist you to build connections, to make introductions, and to create visibility for your company in that market. Networking and connectivity are the first step in export, and companies need to avoid a purely sales-based mindset. Focusing on building relationships in the first instance, particularly for services companies, is a smart strategic plan. Look to connect to companies who can help you to build networks, facilitate introductions, and develop your visibility in the market. A key example of this was a few weeks ago, one of our tier 1 companies had a meeting with a cluster organisation based in the north of Sweden. The premise of the meeting was simply to understand more about the cluster and to gain some insight. This quickly moved forward apace during the discussion, and during the course of the meeting, a discussion was had around potentially inviting our company to speak at a conference to be attended by 70 companies from their sector. Our company, in turn, invited the cluster to speak at an event they are organising. And the following day, the cluster organisation had introduced our company to another organisation interested in exploring collaborative opportunities. This mutually beneficial relationship, not focused on sales, but on relationship building, connectivity, collaboration, and co-creation, will, we hope, create significant opportunities and a pipeline of contacts for the company into the future. Often, the most productive partnerships, particularly for services companies in new markets, are not sales relationships at all. We talked at the outset of this presentation about the need for smart specialisation in European markets. This was borne out in our matchmaking meetings for all of our services companies. It's very clear that finding a niche and an area where you have a strong specialty is an important factor for services companies looking to build connections and grow those connections into business relationships in European markets. It stands to reason that generalists looking to sell services to large saturated markets will have a tough road ahead. Focus on specific offers, the narrower the better, which will allow you to be targeted in your outreach and which will instantly speak to prospective partners. It's worth noting that all 3 companies received feedback during matchmaking meetings that one or more potential partners had been interested to meet with them because they were interested in the level of differentiation a company from Trinidad and Tobago was able to offer. I think, as Jason Lindsay mentioned in the presentation prior to the start of today's session, he said that we present a big cultural proposition, and this is really, really clear. It's important to celebrate and highlight your country of origin and the unique perspective it gives you. Continuing to gather market intelligence through outreach is vital. As we've seen, not all markets which look promising will turn out to be opportunities. It's important to gather this information to reassess and readjust strategy accordingly. A negative response can be just as valuable from a risk-managed strategy perspective as a positive one. Flexibility and creativity, the ability to review and reset, are essential qualities for exporters. As we discussed at the outset, the changing nature of export promotion is that there has been a strategic shift away from simply supplier-purchaser relationships. Exporting goes beyond sales to new, interesting forms of partnership and collaboration. Partners are looking for and they want to connect to companies where there's a degree of complementarity. And business relationships are increasingly focused on partnerships and co-creation, making partnerships work based on win-win for both parties. For companies looking to make connections in European markets, it's important to bear this in mind in terms of their outreach. Your messaging should focus on developing mutually beneficial relationships. When looking to target B2B partners, the key is to identify companies with like-minded shared values. It's important for companies to look at the big picture. Signing a contract is just the start. Identifying partners with whom long-standing quality, three-dimensional relationships can be developed is extremely important when aiming to build sustainable partnerships. Strong relationships and ease of doing business are vitally important. Aside from the capacity building workshops and matchmaking meetings, all companies have benefited from scheduled one-to-one coaching and mentoring meetings with MSI. Just thinking about the services companies on the programme, we've been able to assist companies to develop their exporter toolkit of export documents, to discuss export opportunities and steps to export growth, and export strategy development. We've provided feedback on websites, on social media strategy, and have provided guidance in terms of the development of service offerings. We've provided market research insight on markets outside of the initial scope of the project. We've provided our perspective on partner opportunities, guidance on trade show preparation, and have been in a position to organise a meeting with one of our Tier 3 companies with industry experts who were able to provide invaluable insights into partner acquisition and attendance of a specific European trade show. We have spoken to all of the participating companies about next step plans to ensure that all companies have a clear sense of their next steps in terms of export development, whether that's a focus on national, regional, international, or European growth. It's still early days to assess the long-term impact of the Fit for Europe 2 programme for the participating companies. But even at this stage, we are able to point to significant growth and development amongst the cohort of services companies. We have looked at some of the outcomes of the matchmaking meetings, but it's also important to highlight developments made by our Tier 2 and Tier 3 services companies, which have been significant. Our capacity building interventions have taken place over a 9-month period. And in that time, we have seen transformational growth in our companies in terms of offer development, business organisation, future plans, and trajectory. I wish I was in a position to share more detail on this for individual companies, but of course we take confidentiality seriously. But a number of our Tier 3 and Tier 2 services companies have taken enormous leaps in terms of growth, mindset change, and offer. One of our companies is exhibiting at a trade show in France in October to seek potential partners. Another has launched an international marketing campaign and in the last month has been marketing and selling their services in the UK. Another business owner plans to undertake a master's course at an Italian university to build their capacity in their sector further. Another company has developed an entirely new offer, which has enormous export potential and which they will shortly be market testing in Trinidad and Tobago before rolling it out regionally and internationally. So already the impact has been significant. As you can see, a lot has been achieved since the start of our capacity building programme 9 months ago. In fact, it's been a real challenge to encapsulate all that has been achieved in this presentation. At the outset of the programme, we emphasised to the participating companies that they would only get out of the Fit for Europe 2 programme what they put in. The growth that I have seen in terms of strategy development, mindset change, service development, and future planning from our participating companies is a demonstration of their commitment, their drive and focus, and it evidences the work that's gone into self and company development, capacity building, and innovation. I am so looking forward to following the progress of our Fit for Europe 2 programme participants over the next months and years. I believe great things are in store. The opportunity for innovative and differentiated exporters in European markets is clear. It's not easy. Achieving regulatory compliance, understanding and adapting to cultural differences, achieving fit for your services, and identifying like-minded partners can be and is challenging. But the programme has confirmed that there are huge opportunities for innovative Trinidad and Tobago companies to create new export pathways and platforms in EU markets for specialised services. It's important that services companies continue to be supported to build these relationships, which have the potential to create lasting impact for Trinidad and Tobago. The Fit for Europe 2 programme has looked to engender a spirit of collaboration and co-creation. The Fit for Europe 2 companies have come together to learn and to grow, not just as a cohort, but as a community. Tier 1 companies have been able to learn from Tier 2 and Tier 3 companies. Tier 2 companies have learned from Tier 1 and Tier 3 companies, and Tier 3 companies have learned from Tier 1 and Tier 2 companies. At MSI, we believe in the power of community learning and community growth. We held our final group session last week for the Fit for Europe 2 participants. It was a group sharing and mentoring session. The power of sharing experiences, both positive and negative, and learning from peers cannot be underestimated. Sometimes in business, there's a tendency to hold cards close to your chest, but I believe that together and sharing together, we are stronger. One of the key challenges for companies approaching non-diaspora European markets is a lack of visibility and brand recognition. Moving forward, I believe that there is a strong opportunity for Trinidad and Tobago companies to continue to work together non-competitively in the spirit of co-creation, to build the visibility and the strength of brand TT in European markets, to forge and to create new platforms and pathways which can benefit all, as well as future generations of TT companies. Individual companies can work to build brand presence in European markets alone. But what is clear is that working together as brand TT, Trinidad and Tobago companies have the ability to create a powerful platform for future growth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for that comprehensive overview of the Fit for Europe 2 project with a focus on our services companies, detailing our process, the approach and methodology, all of the capacity building interventions, the mission, and all of the lessons and learnings gained from this intervention. Thank you so much for sharing that. Hold your questions if you have any, note them in the chat. We will be having a Q&A later on, but right now we want to get into an exporter experience. We have Ms. Janelle Murray, the founder and visionary behind Crystal Dream Wedding Events Limited and Bling My Wedding. That name may be familiar to some of you. Now, Janelle is the visionary creator behind Bling My Wedding, a groundbreaking television series inspired by her extensive experience in wedding planning and hosting an annual wedding exposition for over 14 years. Her passion for weddings and entrepreneurship has led her to transform her love for event design into a unique TV concept that turns couples' their dream weddings into reality. As a dedicated entrepreneur, Janelle has participated in several business development programs, including the Republic Bank Entrepreneurship Program for Women, or EBB, the Academy for Women Entrepreneurs Dream Builder Women's Business Creator, and of course, the Fit for Europe 2 project with Export TT. She has also represented her brand on the Services Trade Mission to Jamaica and completed the Master Luxury Workshop at IWED, or the Institute of Wedding and Events Design, furthering her commitment to growing her brand across the Caribbean. Janelle, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mandisa. I would like to say a good morning to everyone that's here. And firstly, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Export TT and also Marketing Scope, Shamila, Mandisa, Jamal, definitely Hannah and Clive. So First, I want to begin by sharing my experience. When I saw the Fit for Europe 2, in terms of they putting out an application for persons who may be interested in exporting their business in terms of the European market, I thought it was an excellent opportunity to get our brand, to get our television show, Bling My Wedding, into that market. However, when applying, we were at a tier 3. We got accepted and we were a tier 3 company. And I must say that Hannah really knows what it is she's talking about and exactly in terms of positioning all the companies. From the very first workshop, it became clear how much we needed to learn and how much we didn't know as a company entering the exporting market. So to just give a little, to just go back a little bit, when we started with the Fit for Europe 2, we had begun our early stages of exporting our services to Jamaica. We are in a lot of conversations in terms of the exporting of our product, Bling My Wedding Jamaica, but we haven't solidified any dealers yet. So coming on board the Fit for Europe 2 was at a perfect time in where it would have aided us in terms of preparing all our documentation, our brand identity, our exporting strategy, our distribution plan, and also our company one-pager. And so I understand Hannah's vision and her thought in terms of us being a tier 3 company. Fast forward 15 months after, I must say that I have a clarity on our export plan and have worked on all the necessary documents that Hannah would have told us that we needed to work on. And I must say that I'm very pleased with where we are at as a company, and we feel very empowered by all the information that the Fit for Europe program would have provided us with. So apart from the workshops, the one-on-one meetings with Hannah was really invaluable in terms of it helped us overcome a lot of hurdles that we were having as a company. And she walked us through some of these steps and some of the things we needed to do. And sometimes, I was like 5 steps in front, and Hannah was like, no, Junal, you need to start from here and you need to grow little by little. And I really appreciate that in terms of with exporting, it is definitely a step-by-step process. It's not something that can be done in just a short space of time. You have to take time developing all your documents, and you have to take it step by step and to also get a better understanding of your brand, your identity, and exactly what it is you're exporting. So beyond the documents and the one-on-one meetings were very instrumental in helping us navigate and address many of the challenges faced as our company entering the export market. These sessions also help us to avoid potential damaging distribution deal that would have significantly negatively impacted our company in years ahead. So having these one-on-one meetings with Hannah always discuss, Junal, it's so important that you ensure that any distribution deals that you're going in, you take your time, you clearly review your documentation and ensure that this is something that you want to go into, because if you enter into a bad deal, it can affect your company for years to come. And I'm so happy that I would have taken that advice and done the due diligence where it would have really helped us ensure that we didn't enter into a bad business deal with somebody who wanted to do distribution with our company. Apart from that, Hannah would have also assisted us in one of the things that we are working on is that Bling My Wedding, as you would know, is a television reality show. And so we are working on getting distribution, international distribution for our company. So soon we'll be entering an international content expo, and Hannah would have been able to help us to get ready for that expo by pairing us with the right person to give us all the information needed to prepare for such expo, and also in terms of marketing our product, Bling My Wedding. Usually, an expo like this will take 6 months to prepare, but Hannah was able to help our company get ready within 4 months' time, which we think that we would not have been able to have done without her insight, her wealth of knowledge. And so from our company, Crystal Dream Weddings and Bling My Wedding, we want to say a heartfelt thank you. Any company that's listening and that's interested in, exporting your services, I want to also say that the export team is a fantastic team. Any problems that I would have had or that I would have encountered, just a phone call or even sending an email to Hannah, they were always ready to assist, always there to support. And this is what we need as medium-sized and small entrepreneurial companies, business companies that are exporting for the first time. The information, I must say, was very valuable. And I want to say thank you again.
Thank you so much, Janelle, for sharing so thoughtfully and really giving us a sense of the benefits that you've derived. It's been really wonderful to chart your growth over this process, and we look forward to more wonderful, wonderful things from you in the coming months and certainly years. So thank you again. And we have one more. We have one more exporter experience within the project. We have with us today Mr. Edwin Jones of Heather Jones International. So meet Edwin Ayinde Jr. Jones. A seasoned executive with over 3 decades of experience spanning ICT, finance, and fashion. Edwin spearheads HJI with a focus on delivering bespoke solutions and excellence, reshaping B2B landscapes with his blend of business savvy and fashion innovation. Under his leadership, the companies that he has led have achieved remarkable milestones, including a historic 50 million sales record in 30% year-on-year revenue growth for startups through advanced technology. Edwin's commitment to sustainability is evident in reducing carbon emissions by 20% within a year and forging partnerships with leading sustainability NGOs. From Port of Spain to global cities, Edwin's vision promises innovative solutions for a stylish, sustainable future, fostering collaboration as the key to collective success in the dynamic business landscape. Edwin, we're ready for you. You're muted, Edwin.
Let's try that again. I said, wow, what an intro. I was sitting there looking around the room wondering, who's this guy? So, greetings to everyone. All protocols observed. Mandisa, Shamala, Hannah, and everyone who's present here today. Thank you guys for allowing me to share. And I really want to say that really enjoyed the last few months, about 9 months with everyone. And in terms of being able to actually grow in an exponential way, this program actually taught me a lot of things that will, in terms of what will in the peripherals or the actual blind spots about some of the plans, because we joined in terms of this whole operation, and the approach came in at an integral strategic part in terms of HJI's growth, but not only that, but in terms of the transition and in terms of our transformation. So basically having Shamlan there to continuously be there and guide and operate, it allows us to really fine tune and identify specifically, but what it did, it helps us to really look from a 360 view in terms of our export strategy, in terms of our research, in terms of our consumer analysis, in understanding that consumer behavior, competitive analysis, regulatory considerations. There was a lot of things that that was quickly, or through the guidance of Hannah and even Clyde, for us to quickly understand things. So it allowed me to learn a lot whilst we were doing, and it really put us into sort of a forward position. And one of the greatest aspects of this program is that it was allowing the growth potential to be recognized, and also there was space to learn through I wouldn't say trial and error, but there's space to learn through through the process. So the process was laid down, and then we were able to follow through the process in terms of even developing what would be the brand introduction would look like, what would be in terms of the brand connection, but not just saying these things, but really, really understanding it and allowing it to resonate. And those were some key things, because normally in a new market entry, and for us re-entering market and re-establishing and rebranding, those things are really, really not viewed as work that you can do in terms of rapid pace. They're really the fine-tuning and the finessing and the refining of it, and being able to kind of get us the position where we are now in 9 months is incredible. So I'm incredibly grateful for that. I'm incredibly, in terms of the ability also from the feedback, the clarity in terms of the positioning, and being able to even review and rethink some of the ideas and test it, allows us in terms of the product adaptation, right? In terms of from our perspective, design customizations, sustainability practices, all of these things, to really be able to unpack it, because with HGI having a 5-decade sort of existence, a lot of things were just into one package, and now having to now kind of segment and give everything its own view and its own lane was one of the areas that we were really able to achieve. And what I want to share is just our journey in that, and being able to be understood in terms of what it is you're doing, and having that communication crystal clear, so that we can communicate to our potential partners, potential buyers, that we are here to provide some sort of solution or service, versus we are here to get an opportunity. And that having that messaging, and not only that, having the messaging stand alone in context, so that it speaks, or the material or the presentation speaks in a way that really connects without someone having to explain or provide any additional information, which is great, because it took us into our export logistics, right? In terms of thinking through, in terms of the type of partnership, in terms of looking at, okay, our delivery methods, in terms of understanding the compliance, and it can go from very systematic things like shipping and distribution, to customs and compliance, to warehouse solution. So really integrating that communication in a really distilled way that allows the reception of what it is we do to be understood, and has a sort of a universal reach as we expand into this global stage. But even giving us the positioning now that we could look to gain what is valuable or invaluable to us, is that we can gain that trust, or that sense of recognition, or that sense of building that community space and dialogue in terms of the different persons that we would have been able to be introduced in terms of the meetings and stuff. But the unique aspect of it is that it came together in a way that the linkages and the matchmaking were unique, and yet still it fit with ease. So it allows us to simplify a lot of the conversations and the complexities and the nuances, and allows us to now have a more data-driven approach and a customized feel, but in a sense, it's really familiar and unique, which is everyone felt that they understood who we were, and we understand that. So it had a familiarity in terms of we were already in a seasoned, established relationship that we are now just continuing. So it gives us that positioning, and we will take possession. So in that context, what I really want to share with everyone today in terms of our experience is really finding that organic fit and developing from it, in terms of your refinement, in terms of your placement, in terms of your positioning, right? In terms of the marketing and branding, and really kind of separating what is strategy from what is tactics, understanding the digital marketing campaign, understanding whatever, in our case, will be fashion shows and events, collaboration and partnership, and really kind of being able to feel vulnerable, which is another great part, to say things in terms of this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm approaching, and get some real clarity and honest feedback in terms of saying, hey, okay, here's some opportunities there, and seeing the sort of a blind spots through things. So for us, it was really from having experience when doing it and then coming back in and having the opportunity through this program to share between and go sort of like Hannah wearing this sort of dual hat of coach in one sense, where she's like, okay, these are the specific things. And then a mentor where it's like, hey, this is how it was done and this is how, you can learn from this. So those are some of the elements that I would like to highlight, because I think it's important in terms of any export strategy, in terms of any entering into any new market, is really getting into that space based on understanding clearly and being aware of your position and positioning. And what happens next is that the relationships form the symbiotic sort of organic approach, and it flows in a seamless type of way. And that's really great because it positions you in terms of the right way to achieve whatever economic growth or whatever economic ideas or goals that are set. So moving into that, it really also gives us a good position as well, and a good perspective in terms of the customer engagement and that sort of feedback. So it just helps to channel all these things into perspective, that it no longer becomes this flood gate being open and everything being rolled out, but then everything is really nicely placed in its place. And even though it's simplified, it still encourages us to be persistent and consistent with our endeavors, but at least you don't have to think through, okay, what am I supposed to be doing? And is this what we know? It gives you a clear perspective on where you need to place an emphasis, focus, and that sort of kind of comes together in a flow, in a rhythm, a melody that everyone is kind of jiving to, and it creates the rhythm of the relationship, right? It helps us to also look at how we're going to build our online presence. Again, how we're going to receive information from the customer in terms of how does that mechanism work. It really looks in terms of also allowing us to feel confident in the challenges faced, which was really great, because through this process, there was a lot of different challenges and being able to do that. But one of our greatest challenge in terms of what this program allowed us to overcome is that right at the start of the program, I had to undergo a very tedious task of rebuilding internally and realigning and retooling resources in the same time of being able now to continuously provide our services. So in terms of that, and really looking at what the program allowed us to do is in that rebuilding and retooling is really to really integrate in a natural, organic way our cultural diversity, and our cultural differences, and it also allows us to see whatever logistic hurdles that was there. But in terms of that, it allows us to really be clear in terms of what our future aspirations was going to be and how we're going to expand our market research, our innovation product lines, our strategic, or even strengthen our brand loyalty or brand identity. But the idea overall, right, in terms of the experience, it really represents a significant milestone, right, by leveraging all of the market insights, and not only insight, but the ability that I would have learned in terms of how to foresight, which is key in terms of what I would like to share with some of the other companies going out there. It's not just the understanding what's there, but seeing what's not there and being able to position or present solutions in advance of it, right? So these would have been some of the ideas, but in terms of effective logistics and marketing strategies, is really well positioned to thrive, in terms of our industry and landscape, and focusing on the sustainable and innovation aspect. So what it did, it allows us now to feel confident in terms of what we are doing and why we're doing it, and in which way it's being done, right? And then also cultivating a brand that resonates with a diverse and discerning customer base, right? So that in a nutshell would have been my experience in terms of my actual takeaways from this program, and what I can share from my experience in terms of how it will actually help some other companies or some other brands to succeed in terms of their export strategy, is really looking at defining and the refinement of the relationship types, and that is the strength of it, because once that's there, then what happens is you sort of get a formula, which is, basically, what you're doing, why you're doing it, and who is doing what, and then when and where part of it sort of, works itself out, and it allows a kind of even flow with confidence in terms of what it's doing. And when the challenges are faced, then you have that support, so I can go to Hannah and say, hey, this is what it is. I can go Shamla, and having that ability to reach out and connect, and then would through things in a live way and get to the result, and then get to meet with the different potential deals, and at the same time receive that back in guidance and saying, hey, look at these things and consider it, and allowing the course correction, but the development holistically, right? And that would be in terms of my conclusion for the Fit for Europe and Fit for Europe 2, sorry, and what we would have learned, what my experience would have been, and where I'm looking forward now to continuing in this, as we are planning to do our show in October, as a sort of the taking all of the lessons learned and putting it into this production, and then using that as our entry or symbol and our springboard into the UK European market. All right, so thank you for listening, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. Back to Mandisa.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you sharing so generously in terms of the value you derive, the experience, and of course, we're excited for your show later this year. We definitely look forward to seeing the outcomes of that, and we will speak it into existence, your success in the UK and EU market. So thanks so much for sharing. I'd like to open the floor at this point for any questions that our audience may have, either from Hannah or Edwin or Junelle. If you have any, put them in the chat. I'm not seeing anything right now in the chat. I will give us a couple seconds to see if any come through, but I know this has been quite a comprehensive set of presentations, and so there may be complete clarity, and we would love that. Next steps. Do you mean for the project itself? I will assume, sorry, Corinne Lafont. Is this directed to Edwin specifically, or in terms of the Fit for Europe 2 project as a whole? No, yes, no. Sorry, I'm struggling a little bit. Which one? To Edwin or about the project? Well, I will speak to the project. So this is our second in the dissemination seminar series. This was, again, our desire to share the information and the outcomes with the exporting and export interested public, so that firms and individuals could understand the nature of the market, the potential, the challenges, the things they would need to do to become compliant and to have a chance of achieving success in penetrating these markets. And we will have our final seminar, our closing soon. But while this project does come to a close at the end of this month, our work with these companies continues, right? So everyone in this project was assigned a client manager who was their like buddy, their person, their right hand during this process, and that relationship continues. These will be companies that we will continue to work with, continue to chart their progress, continue to support them whether through our services or referring them to services of other organizations within the Export Support Network that can add value to their growth and development as exporters, whether, again, depending on their tier, whether it's regional or further afield. So that is where we are. Oh, I'm going to scroll to Edwin. Edwin, this question is for you. Heather Jones has been around for decades, as mentioned. What did it take internally to pivot to the requirements of entering the European market? And what did it take personally as well as organizationally?
Wow. Okay, great question. So what it took, I'm gonna start from the latter. What it took personally is support, right? Having the right supporting team to be objective in terms of alignment and in terms of balance of what the vision is and the actual implementation of the vision, and being able to separate. So what I learned to do, and again, it's thanks to Hannah on this, is to really become very, very, very pragmatic in terms of what are your strategic overarching goals and what are so in terms of your business strategic goals and then your business tactics, and what that looks like. If we had a visual of it, the strategic goals are like a straight line, and it's a trajectory line. So you could kind of almost say, okay, I'm shooting for the stars or shooting for the moon. So you kind of angle that, or you put it at an angle, and you figure out, okay, this is the angle or the tilt or this is where I'm going, the trajectory in terms of where I want to go from a business strategy. But then getting there is the deliberate, specific, detailed things that you need to do, and when you need to do it, that kind of nets back or ties back to the strategic goal. And understanding the difference between the strategic goals are continuous, they are broad, they are conceptual, but the tactics are specific, it's deliberate, and but it must not conflict with the strategic goal. It must always return or net back to that overall strategic goal. So this basic steps is breaking it down. So being able to compartmentalize every single idea, concept, or division into this model will allow you to now see clearly whether or not and where the course correction aspects of things need to be, right? And that's something that you need to do quickly, because as someone driving the business, you really have a little bit more information and even less time, but a great impact in terms of what the decision making is. So this strategy allows you to approach things with a pragmatic sense, but with confidence, and then it still gives you room to grow and learn in it. So it's not very labor intensive, but it allows you to develop an approach, is what I'm saying. So the other part of it, persistence and patience. So that's the first part of the question, persistence and patience. It required a lot of patience and persistence. So if you look at it, Heather Jones would have started basically in 1974, 78 is when it made sense that this is a business. And then by 83, you're now seeing an emergence onto the stage as a fashion designer, or even in the fashion space with any sort of relevance. And then, so that, if you look at that time span there, it took at least 10 years of doing what I call the graphotropic, or the behind the scenes, or the graphotropic is the things that happen when the seed is in the soil and the root system is growing out. Nobody's seeing that. And the surface, you continually have to nurture that surface by, watering it to make sure that the seed is growing, but you're not seeing any evidence. And then you get the phototropics where you see the plant or whatever is emerging through the soil. And understanding that requires patience and persistence, right? And in that patience and persistence, what that really translates to is, in a philosophical kind of way, is faith. You have to have faith, or that unwavering belief in your dream, in your vision. But the most important thing is that you have to make a pivot not to chase anything, but to become that thing that you want to become. So even if today you are not where you need to be, you have to behave that in a way that you're already there, and don't allow the circumstances. And this is one of the things that Heather did very well. She didn't allow the circumstances of the time to define her, refine her, or define her in that sense. It did not. She didn't allow those things to cage in, and she sort of stayed true to the purpose. And that's where the patience and persistence piece come in. But the most important thing is really being understanding of the aspects of whatever it is you're doing. You need to have a very strong resilience, in terms of what and where, and understand that whatever you're going through, it's a part of the process, and it's not happening to you, but it's happening for you. So these are so many things looking back in terms of what would have allowed Heather Jones and Heather Jones International to span 5 decades. I hope that answers your question. If you need any further clarification, let me know.
Thank you so much, Edwin. Let's move on. And Hannah, this one goes to you. We have Tashana from Data Minders Business Research. So the question is, for research companies, I've been speaking to my international network. They said that the market is highly competitive. How can a research company from Trinidad and Tobago distinguish itself?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Hi, Tashana. So one of our companies on our program, as you may be aware, is a research consultancy company. My background is also in market research. It is, as you say, a crowded marketplace. And trying to find that opportunity, that niche, it can be really challenging. What I'd encourage you to do, and this goes back to something discussed in the presentation, is to really focus on finding a niche, finding an area of specialism within research that will enable you to stand out, will give you a clear and narrow focus in terms of partner identification. And obviously, I can't lead you in that direction in terms of what that might be, but when you've decided upon that niche and you've found that specialist area, be really visible in that area. So publish white papers, find opportunities to speak on it, to get press coverage, because that level of visibility is going to be really important in terms of outreach to potential partners. There are also opportunities, once you have that established, to connect to partners through organisations like SMR and the MRS, the Market Research Society in the UK. But yeah, I would really, really advise you to find that niche, find something that makes you different, that makes you stand out in that market, and gives you the ability to connect to potential partners, and it'll make you really stand out.
Thanks for that, Hannah. I hope that provided some value to you, Tashana. To circle back to Corinne, you meant, okay, so you already have a cohort for those in the webinar who are interested in benefiting. What are the next steps? So this is our seminar on the back end. So we had 2 seminars at the beginning of the project where we detailed the research, the selection of target markets, provided an overview of the project, and then we invited recruitment. So this is us 15 months later at the end of things, giving you the results of this endeavor, right? And so, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we will be retaining these companies and continue to work with them. Now, because this is an externally funded program, and this is, yes, the second of its kind, but this is CDB funded, well, technically European Union funded, right? And so for us to have another one of these, you will have to go through that process, rather, of pitching it as a project and trying to get funding, because again, not a government, it was partly funded by this external party. And so we have to do our final things, close, review, revise, and then look at perhaps doing another. Now, the value of sharing this information is to equip exporters and potential exporters who were not in the program with the information to determine whether this could be a market for them, to understand how they can prepare themselves, the things to do, the documents they have to provide, the way they need to revise their product, they need to be open to criticism and be agile and all of those good things, so that the value of this experience could be more widely disseminated and shared. Now, if you are a company that is interested in exporting to the European Union, we now have this research, these learnings at Export TT, so we can provide support, guide, advise, and all of those good things. So there will not be another cohort of this just now. There may be one in the future, that remains to be seen. I think we would like to, I think we have spoken about the ways in which we would refine the approach to this project such that we can do it again. But again, that remains to be seen. We are still in the final stages of this cohort. But if you are interested in exporting to the European Union, please reach out to us. We can provide some guidance, information, research support, all of these things. All of these services are available to all exporting or export interested companies, irrespective of market, whether it's the EU, the US, regional, wherever, right? So reach out to us and we can have a conversation about where you are and what you want to achieve, and we can determine the services and support that we can provide to you. Well, ours as well as any other partners, any other export support partners in the network. I hope that is helpful. I hope that provides you with a way forward. So hopefully I'll be hearing from you relatively soon, so that we can see how, share we contact. Sure. I'll drop my email in the chat for anyone. Bear with me. I will drop that in chat and you can reach out. Yeah. Any other questions before we say thank you? We're a little over time and I'm aware of that. So I think that is it. So thank you everyone for being with us. Again, appreciation to Hannah and the entire MSI team. Thank you for this comprehensive presentation. Thank you for our 2 exporters in the program that gave their experiences and their lessons and their values, all of the things that they have learned. And thank you all of us for staying the course, for being interested, for listening and sharing this. I hope that this is valuable to you. I hope that it helps you figure out your next steps. And I will drop this in the chat, my email in the chat before we close. So bear with me, Corinne. And for anyone, if you reach out to me, I can connect you with whoever in the organization, and we can set up a meeting to discuss your export goals and the support available. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. So my email address is in the chat. Feel free to shoot me a line and we can have a conversation and set up a meeting. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much.